mu ndongo ng'omuntu akozeeko mu bulamu bw'ekiro, mu taxes ez'ekiro, mu mikolo egy'ekiro. Tumanyi nti bangi abafumba kyayi ku zipaaka, abavuga zibboda ekiro, abavuga taxi ekiro, ng'omu agivuga misana omulala agivuga kiro, boda omu agivuga misana omulala agivuga kiro, n'ebirala ebifaanana bwe bityo. Obulamu bwabwe bwakoma. Lwaki? Kuba Museveni yateekawo kafyu. Tasobola kunnyonnyola nti kafyu egasa bweti mu kulwanyisa obulwadde. During the day, the towns are packed, but at night, simply because he wants to subjugate the people and keep them under stiff control, he has imposed that curfew, and every now and then when he's scared of what would happen, he tightens the curfew. We criticize that in the hardest terms possible. But again, criticizing it is not going to be enough, ladies and gentlemen. In our suggested way forward, maybe we'll suggest a few things, but like I constantly say, it's also upon you, the people of Uganda. It's not only upon the leaders. You are leaders too, so you can also devise solutions. Besides the night economy that has died, the health care sector, we borrowed loads of money to revamp our health care. We had expectations that maybe the COVID-19 pandemic might give us reason to refurbish our hospitals, to restock our hospitals, to have medicines in our hospitals. Alas, General Museveni used all the borrowed money to ensure that he uses it in campaigns, to ensure that he uses that money to, perpetuate himself in power. And for that reason, our health sector continues to sink. Our hospitals and health centers continue to be sick themselves. People suffering from COVID-19 are dying here in Uganda because of reasons like lack of oxygen. You can imagine, in a pandemic, in a health crisis, hospitals are doing worse than they were doing before, despite of the trillions borrowed. Insecurity. We are facing insecurity brought by security. What do I mean? It is the security agencies that are supposed to guarantee security. Very unfortunately, they are the ones that are increasing the insecurity. We are aware that police officers, LDUs, soldiers are the ones either robbing people or waylaying them and extorting money from them. Just a simple drive at 8 o'clock, you're going to find people rounded up. If you are able to bring 10,000 or 5,000, you will go home. If you're not, then you're going to go to prison. Very many people are in prisons having been arrested out of purportedly enforcing a curfew. So this is insecurity by security. We've seen looting by men and women in uniform, extortion by men and women in uniform. Very sad. Very many grave injustices that are ongoing. However, like we said when we were starting our campaign, that we have gone past the book of lamentations. We are heading to the book of actions. So because I don't intend to take so long communicating, ladies and gentlemen, it is necessary to remind us of the challenges that we are facing as a nation. But again, we want to remind you that we are the solutions, and therefore to point so much to the solutions, well knowing that the nation, the leadership that we have is not pro-people, but against the people. Corruption is one thing that we cannot fail to talk about. Recently, the Auditor General released a report showing that the government have actually failed to account for the billions and billions that were borrowed to fight COVID-19. Twewoze billion in a billion, government tesobola kulaga ngeri gye zaafulumiziddwa nenga zaafulumiziddwa. And that is how it has been. Every day in the papers there's a story talking about corruption, talking about billions and billions that have been stolen. Unfortunately, these billions are stolen either by relatives of the president, or by cohorts of the president, or the inner circle of the president, or the untouchables of this country. And therefore, we can only talk about it and leave it there. And that's it, until we decide to paint a better way forward. Number 3, the way forward. What is the way forward? With all the challenges that we've mentioned, ladies and gentlemen, with all the injustices, with all the unbearable pains that we are facing, what is the way forward? First and foremost, we looked at changing leadership, and that is why we went into the election, which election was marred with brutality, with lawlessness, with murder. Hundreds of our people were killed, and looking at the 18th and 19th of November, over 100 shot dead. Nobody held accountable, only for General Museveni to come out chest thumping and congratulating his boys for a job well done. And the killing has continued. We won the election, but we were not announced winners. I was put under house arrest. We petitioned the Supreme Court. You all saw how the Chief Justice conducted himself and his remarks. And that's why I told you that we are bringing back the matter to the court of the people. So what is the way forward? Friends, in the 1980s, we all remember General Museveni saying, and I quote, "What else can one do when a government has closed all ways of peaceful change? What can we do other than resigning to slavery?" He said that before he and his friends took up arms, which led to the death of more than 500,000 people. That was in 1980. There's a book that I've been reading. This book is called Mission to Freedom, Uganda Resistance News. It was written between 1981 and 1985. This book was written by Museveni and his friends. I want to quote from this very book. I will read for you a little bit from page 3. It says, and I read, "The right of rebellion against tyranny has been recognized from the most ancient of times to the present day by men of all creeds, ideas, and doctrines. It is part and parcel of the notion of political liberty. It transcends any narrow laws enacted by petty dictators and despots." The right to rebellion transcends any laws enacted by petty dictators and despots, just like Museveni. He goes on to say, "The right to rebel against tyranny was at the very root of the American War of Independence against the British imperialism. It was at the root of the French Revolution against divine right and monarchical despotism. It was at the root of many successful anti-colonial wars in countries here in Africa and elsewhere. For example, Algeria, Kenya, Zimbabwe, Mozambique, Guinea-Bissau, Angola, and others. Even the normally imperturbable Britons found occasion to invoke this right on a number of occasions. Once at Rudumide, to force King John to sign the Magna Carta, and on other occasions to depose crowned kings like James II and Charles. This golden right was aptly defined by the American Declaration of Independence, signed on July 4th, 1776 in Philadelphia. Museveni goes on to say, he goes on to quote the Declaration of the American Declaration of Independence, and that was in 1776. It says, "We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights, that among these are the right to life, to liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. That to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed. That whenever any form of government becomes destructive to these ends, it is the right of the people to alter, abolish it, and to institute a new government, laying its foundation on such principles and organizing its powers in such form as to them shall seem most likely to effect their safety and happiness. Museveni goes on to say, indeed, rebellion against tyranny is not only a right, it is a duty for all oppressed people to carry out. The glorious men of the French Revolution stated this truth most aptly in their Declaration of Rights of Man. When a government violates the rights of the people, insurrection is for them the most sacred of rights and most imperative of duty. Muwulire ebigambo bya Museveni. That is Museveni. He says, I'll read this again. The glorious men of the French Revolution stated this truth most aptly in their Declaration of the Rights of Man, that when government violates the rights of the people, insurrection is for them the most sacred of rights and the most imperative of duties. The people of Uganda have invoked this right and arisen to the call of duty and taken up arms against Obote's regime of blood, oppression, and national shame. Then he went ahead to give us a justification of the war. These words were spoken by Museveni when he was our age. They go on to give us a story of 1980. This is in a book written by Museveni. These are his words. Museveni goes on to say, on December 10th, 1980, Ugandans went to the polls. By late afternoon on December 11th, it was clear that UPC and Obote were heading for a resounding defeat, in spite of all the rigging that they had done at earlier stages of registration of voters, nomination of candidates, demarcation of electoral boundaries, etc. The UPC was seized with panic. Paulo Muwanga, at the time Obote's proxy as head of government, took over the powers of the Electoral Commission, and by his decree of December 11th, 1980, the decree stopped the returning officers and the Electoral Commission itself from declaring any results unless such results were personally approved by Muwanga. The decree further directed that all returning officers should not submit their constituency results to the Electoral Commission, but to himself, Paulo Muwanga, Obote's man at the time. A record fine of 70,000 in 1980, that was more than 200 million today. That was the fine imposed by Muwanga for anybody who did not comply with the decree. At a secret meeting throughout the night of December 11th, Obote and Muwanga proceeded to allocate seats to their party cohorts, even those that had not even gotten 10% of the votes. The following day of 12th December 1980, using their control of the national radio, the army, the police, and other state machinery, and backed by the government of Tanzania, Obote and Muwanga announced their coup. One became the president, the other became the vice president and minister for defense. Once again, a minority and unpopular clique was imposed on the people of Uganda, leaving them with no option but to take up arms in defense of the democratic rights. Those are words of Yoweri Museveni in 1980 up to 1985. Do you find any similarity to today? If you only remove the name Obote and put the name Museveni, if you only remove the name Paulo Muwanga and put a name of Byabakama, you will find that this whole writing becomes fresh again. Fellow Ugandans, we are back to that same point 40 years later. 40 years later, after losing more than 500,000 of our mothers and fathers, we are back to the same place. The same thing, and even worse, is happening today in our generation. So, what is the way forward? I've labored to go into all that detail so that you understand where we are and where we must go as a nation, as a generation. I've said it right from the word go, that we are non-violent. We don't believe in violence. We are tired, we are frustrated, we are hungry, and we are angry. But at least we still have a brain. We have conscience. We respect life. We are many, much more than these criminals. We are young.